You're listening to Concentrates with Dr. T, a podcast discussing cannabis science, news, and hot topics. In continuing discussions about social equity in cannabis, I want to highlight the LGBTQ community within cannabis this week. LGBTQ advocates have had a very large role in the early legalization efforts of cannabis. And this is kind of an unsung effort given by the LGBTQ community to everybody else. So I'm going to go through this article by Bloom Medicinals. It's a dispensary chain across the nation, actually. Check them out. They made a great article discussing the LGBTQ community's role in the legalization of medicinal marijuana. And so I'm going to read through it, add some flavor, and as I go through this podcast, I'm also going to kind of give my own experience as a gay man in the cannabis industry. I'm going to go through some statistics outlining the current state of LGBTQ representation in the cannabis community, in the cannabis industry, actually. And finally, I'm going to show you some LGBTQ cannabis industry groups that are out there. I'm not sure how active they are, honestly. I'm trying to reach out right now and get involved myself, and I would encourage you to do so. Or if you know of any other groups, please let me know in the comments or send me a DM or get in touch with me, because this is an area that I'm interested in getting involved in. So please let me know. So let's just start out with this article and talk about Dennis Peron, who was one of the trailblazers of medicinal cannabis. And the article is pretty good, actually, and I'm looking forward to reading it with you and kind of adding some more information as it comes up. So, reading the article, The Father of Medical Marijuana. According to Dr. Dale Geringer, who is the director of NORML and co-author of Proposition 215, the legalization of medical cannabis would not have happened as soon as it did without Peron's relentless activism. This is why many have called Dennis Peron the father of medical marijuana in the United States. Born in the Bronx, Dennis grew up in Long Island and moved to the Castro district in San Francisco after having served in the Air Force. He was drafted in 1966 and served during the Vietnam War, so he was a veteran. The Summer of Love is the title of this section. Prior to shipping off to Vietnam, Dennis had a brief stopover in San Francisco during the Summer of Love in 1967. Peron noticed that the hippie culture was very accepting of the gay community there, so he decided he would return to San Francisco after serving his time in the Air Force. During his tour in Vietnam, Dennis' unit was dispatched to the border to spy on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The Viet Cong became aware of their plan and penned Dennis' unit down with daily aerial bombardments. His assignment during this time was to stack the body bags of fallen soldiers. That's a tough job. I mean, I can't even imagine the conditions that he went through. Amid all the death and destruction is where Peron tried cannabis for the first time. Wonder where, how he got it. I would love to know more about the story there. How many troops were getting access to it? Were they getting it from the locals? How was it helping them? I would love to know more. It's also where he came out as a gay man. After witnessing the horrors of war firsthand, Peron returned to the States with the goal of helping to make the world a kinder and more peaceful place. Dennis also returned with 2 pounds of Thai cannabis he stashed away in his duffel bag. It is said those 2 pounds of marijuana helped launch a career that would see Peron become one of the biggest cannabis providers in California. So, after all that destruction and he had to witness and participate in, he managed to get his hands on 2 pounds of marijuana and bring it back with him to California. The Big Top Cannabis Supermarket. Upon returning to the States, Peron moved into a 3-story Victorian house in the Castro district. Dennis shared this house with over 20 people and would sell cannabis out of the 3rd floor. The top floor, huh? Known as the Big Top Cannabis Supermarket, customers could select from locally grown cannabis as well as landrace strains like Acapulco Gold and Thai. So I'm sorry, I just have to comment on this. The Big Top, really, they are not talking about the fact that this was sold on the third floor of a big house. Let me just say that. It gives me a little bit more information about Dennis than I thought I would know. This is absolutely hilarious. Like, they're going to the Big Top to buy cannabis. They're not talking about the house. Okay, sorry. Moving on. Peron believed he was providing a much-needed service and would openly defy laws which prohibited the sale of cannabis in California. Dennis was not afraid of getting arrested. He was arrested many times over the years. His biggest fear was being robbed. Well, that makes sense. He was doing something illicit at the time and underground, and so he was inviting certain sketchy characters in his house. He didn't know them, so they were strangers. Who knows what could have happened to him. It sounds like gangs never robbed him or anything, but he did have encounters with law enforcement. Despite multiple arrests and police raids, Dennis remained focused on making cannabis accessible to those who needed it. The Island Restaurant. In 1974, Dennis opened the Island Restaurant in the Castro district, which served vegetarian food downstairs and cannabis upstairs. The restaurant became the site of many spirited discussions about gay rights and the legalization of cannabis. And I've got to say, only a gay man would make the front for their cannabis business a vegetarian food store. That is absolutely hilarious. Putting something so holistic and healthful and innocent up front and then selling cannabis out of the back, or out of the upstairs. That's fabulous. Many rising stars in the business and political community were known to frequent the Island Restaurant. One of these rising stars was Harvey Milk, a business owner and gay rights activist. The first openly gay man elected to public office in California. In 1977, Dennis helped Harvey Milk win election to the San Francisco's Board of Supervisors. By doing so, Harvey became the first openly gay man to be elected to public office in California. Harvey Milk was known for opposing government interference in private sexual matters and also for favoring the legalization of cannabis. During his time in office, Milk sponsored a bill which banned discrimination in public housing, accommodations, and employment based on sexual orientation. The bill passed by a vote of 11-1. So Dennis was involved in the advancement of LGBTQ rights early on with this Harvey Milk. In the 70s, he was advancing the rights of patients and people the access to cannabis. And so basically, LGBTQ history is totally enmeshed with cannabis prohibition history, and our community has had an outsized effect on the access that people have now to cannabis. It's largely overlooked and forgotten, which is unfortunate, and quite frankly, I'm not as familiar with this kind of history as I feel I should be, and I'm becoming more familiar with it every day now. So I hope that from this podcast that young LGBTQ people can gain encouragement and know that we've been here for a long time, we belong here, and even though it may not feel like it right now and things may seem uncertain, we absolutely do belong in this industry and we should run it and own it. So this article goes on, I'm going to leave it at that, and this article goes on to discuss more of the early history of marijuana legalization and decriminalization that was pushed by Peron and Milk. And we'll get to one more story here within this article because it's kind of gut-wrenching. How compassionate use led to change in legislation. Dennis Peron was already a staunch cannabis activist prior to the AIDS epidemic. However, seeing firsthand how helpful it could be in providing relief to those suffering from AIDS made him even more resolute in pushing for its legalization. Cannabis anti-nausea and appetite stimulation effects provided AIDS patients with much needed relief from some of the side effects of certain medications and treatment options. At the time, patients dealing with nausea or loss of appetite were being given Marinol, a prescription drug containing THC. Unfortunately, many would end up vomiting their medicine. This is where Dennis knew that a few puffs of medical cannabis could provide patients with the relief they needed. So this is a very interesting point, and why route of administration matters in medicine and pharmaceuticals. So the symptom is nausea and vomiting, and THC can help relieve that nausea and vomiting. But if you put it in a pill and then you throw up, what just happened? You lost the medicine. You don't have it. It's not going to relieve your symptoms. But if you inhale the medicine, your body can't reject it. It goes into the bloodstream directly and begins to work its medicinal effects. So that is why he argued for access to inhalable, smokable cannabis for AIDS patients, and how the pharmaceutical industry failed AIDS patients. They were giving an anti-nausea through a route of administration where they could lose the medicine when there was a better route of administration available. So moving on to the story, the shift from cannabis legalization to medicinal use. For Peron, it became personal when his longtime partner, Jonathan West, battled AIDS. Jonathan lost a lot of weight and had developed lesions on his face caused by Kaposi's sarcoma. At the time, Dennis was focused on caring for his partner and was not selling cannabis. They kept a few ounces of cannabis in their apartment that Jonathan used for medicinal purposes. On January 27, 1990, 10 narcotics police officers showed up at Dennis and Jonathan's apartment with a search warrant. It is alleged that the officers forced Jonathan to lie face down on the ground while they said, "You know what AIDS stands for? Asshole in deep shit." The police arrested Peron for possession of marijuana with intent to sell. During the trial, Jonathan West testified that the cannabis was his and that it was being used for medicinal purposes. The judge ended up dropping the charges and reprimanding the arresting officers. Sorry, I just have to take a moment, because that's a tough story to read, honestly. It's tragic, it's gut-wrenching, it's heartbreaking, it's horrible to read about how the law enforcement used cannabis, in this case, as a way, quite frankly, to just discriminate against gay people. And that's a common tactic law enforcement has used throughout the years. They did this with the Black community, Hispanic community as well. Basically, any community where cannabis use was existent or prevalent, they could use the anti-cannabis laws to arrest people selectively. So they could arrest Black people and leave white people alone. They could arrest gay people and leave straight people alone. That's why these kinds of prohibitions are just so dangerous, and why it's so dangerous to have laws prohibiting access to things as benign as plants, because it creates a foothold for government to discriminate against people whenever they see fit. And if you think it can't happen again, wake up. Nothing has changed with the government. The same government that did all this nasty stuff in the 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever, you can look back further, they're doing nasty stuff now that we won't learn about until the 2060s, 2070s, and so on. That's just the reality. So I'll leave the story there, though, because it's that's really what I wanted to bring up, was just this point of how people have been discriminated against based on their community, whether they're a minority, whether they're an LGBTQ person. These are examples of how they've been systemically discriminated against and abused and held down, using cannabis as a tool for doing so. And it really highlights why it's so important now for us to be discussing social equity as we're legalizing cannabis state by state. We have opportunities to right these wrongs. We have the chance now to give big positive economic opportunities to people who have been marginalized, discriminated against, and their lives destroyed from cannabis prohibition in the past, when we all know that was completely unjust. So please read the rest of that article. It's a great article. Thank you for listening to Concentrates with Dr. T. Please tune in next time and follow me on YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Thanks again.